So sucrose, as we said, consists of a combination of glucose and fructose. It's a sugar that's found in plants. Fructose, however, is what we describe as fruit sugar. And this is a monosaccharide. You find sucrose particularly in the sugar beets and the sugar cane, where we get our refined sugar. And fructose is more generally found in fruits. It's what you are. It's the sweet part of the fruit when you're consuming fruits. Now, fructose has a little bit of a bad name, and this is because fructose is not metabolized in quite the same way as glucose is, and it seems to give rise to dietary health problems. And we see this linked particularly with the concept of high fructose corn syrup. Now, sucrose, as I said, is a combination of glucose and fructose. So when you're eating sucrose, refined sugar, you're getting fructose into your body. Back in the 1970s, we were importing a lot of our sucrose, refined sugar, and this was economically hurting the farmers, I think in Florida, who were the sucrose producers in this country. And so to protect the farmers in Florida, we imposed a tariff on imported sugar, refined sugar. And so this had the effect of raising the price of sugar. Now, I have a distinct memory of this because I remember when now you're not going to believe this, but we used to pay 5 cents for a candy bar, and then candy bars suddenly doubled in price to like 10 cents. And my allowance did not go up. And so suddenly the amount of candy that I could purchase with my 50 cent a week, I think it was, allowance, kind of halved. And I declared that it didn't make any sense anymore to be spending my allowance on. It wasn't cost effective to buy candy anymore. So I actually, probably at the age of like 10 or 11 or who knows, I gave up eating candy mostly because the price of sugar went up. Now, of course, then the price of a candy bar went up to like 25 cents. I guess we had hyperinflation in the same decade. I mean, it was crazy.
Allowance.
What's that?
It's half your allowance. Why would you do that?
Yeah, there you go. And now it's like 50 cents or $1. I don't even know what candy costs anymore, but it's not cheap. But anyway, so what happened is the cost of things that had sugar in them went up. And this had an impact on the people who were selling refined sugar, but also the stuff that was made with refined sugar. And what they did is they looked for a substitute for this refined sugar, and what they came up with is something called high fructose corn syrup. So corn syrup is something that is made from corn starch. So you grow your corn, and you can, there's sweet corn, which is a different entity. But if you are growing corn for the starch, you end up with this harder corn that you can mill into cornstarch. And in the 1950s, they came up with these enzymes that they were able to digest the starch with. So you put the starch into liquid, you suspend it into liquid, and you add the enzymes. They had food-grade enzymes, so they didn't have to worry about adulterating the food with these enzymes. And the enzymes chopped up the starch, and what you ended up with was a bunch of maltose and glucose. And I guess they digested it down to glucose, and thus they had corn syrup. So corn syrup is a suspension of glucose molecules. Well, it turns out that glucose is not as sweet as fructose. And I don't think it's as sweet as sucrose either. So corn syrup, although it did, because of the way our bodies perceive these molecules, so it turns out that corn syrup is not that valuable to these people as a refined sugar, as a sucrose substitute, because it just wasn't sweet enough. But if they could convert the glucose to fructose, they would be able to create something that's sweet enough, and they could substitute it. Now, the corn syrup was dirt cheap in comparison to the cost of refined sugar. So there was economic incentive to do this, and lo and behold, they came up with an enzyme that is called an isomerase. It's able to convert glucose into fructose, because glucose and fructose have the same formula, but they have a different structure, and there's an enzyme that's able to convert one into the other. So they're able to take this corn syrup, and they were able to convert at least some of the glucoses in it into fructoses. And they were able to increase the amount of, I think it's to the point where it's 60% fructose, something like that. And they called this high fructose corn syrup. Now it turns out that the amount of fructose to glucose found in this stuff is approximately what you also find in honey, interestingly enough. But at any rate, high fructose corn syrup was about as cheap as corn syrup, and it was nice and sweet, and so they replaced the sucrose with this stuff. Now sucrose has a combination 1-to-1 of glucose and fructose. High fructose corn syrup has even more fructose in it. And for whatever reason, it turns out that it is not good for us at all. It sets things up so that we are more prone to gaining weight, and we are more prone to diabetes when we're on diets that are high in this high fructose corn syrup. So high fructose corn syrup has turned out to be a bad thing. So we decided to save the farmers in Florida from economic ruin, and the cost to us apparently is an epidemic in obesity and diabetes in this country.